Hello, my name is Father Andrew Perry. I'm the parish priest here at St Mary's in East Preston. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the parish and then introduce our deacon who's about to be priested. St Mary's is a smallish parish. We've got about 7,000 people. It's on the coast between Worthing and Littlehampton. Historically, it really was the poor relation in the area. It's a place where the workhouse was. It was mostly small holdings and market gardens, and things really only began to change in the early 1900s when the land was sold for housing and farming all but disappeared. East Preston's very much got a village feel to it, although from the map it might look like part of the urban sprawl of the south coast. There's an awful lot of civic pride and a lot of stuff goes on. It's a very, very busy place. Our demographic is slightly on the older side. The average age in the area is 52. That means that we have one infant school and one junior school, 4 nursing homes. The percentage of the population, 90% of the population is white. Most people live in their own houses. And according to the statistics, the interesting thing about qualifications is that the 2 largest groups, representing just over half the population, are the extremes. Those people with no qualifications and those people with the top level qualifications. So it gives us quite a mixed demographic. I've been the Vicar of Samarius for 3 years now. Physically, it's a very small church. It dates back to 1150. There's a congregation of about 100 on Sunday morning. We're what they describe as sunny side of Central. We have 2 retired priests, one of whose health is not brilliant, and a reader whose health is also not brilliant, and an ordinand due to be ordained next year. And about this time last year, we were joined by our curate, the Revd Emma Ham-Riche. If only she'd brought some talent with her, if only she'd brought some experience with her, if only people liked her, if only she was vaguely competent, life would be a lot easier. However, we struggle on. Before I let her have a word in edgeways, I will just say this though, it's been a privilege and a pleasure to be involved in ministry with Emma over the last year. I've learned a huge amount and I've thoroughly enjoyed having her, so I'll just shut up and let her have her say. Emma, over to you.
Thank you very much. Wow, I'll try and follow that. I would describe my journey to East Preston, I guess, my vocational journey, as a bit of a road to Emmaus. There was no blinding light. I didn't fall off a horse, so there was no real road to Damascus, but there was just a gradual realization that God had been walking beside me my entire life, even when perhaps I hadn't seen him there. And it took someone much wiser than me to point that out to me and enable me to look back over my life and see that the different places that I'd been, the people I'd met, that was all part of God's plan for me. And once I was able to see that, it was like the final jigsaw puzzle piece falling into place and making sense of the rest of my life. And so that brought me to be ordained deacon last June and to East Preston.
How has lockdown been for you in preparing for this? And I think from my experience, I would say lockdown has challenged us enormously to consider different ways of supporting, ministering and reaching out. I think we've done quite well in terms of rising to the challenge and responded as well as we could have done to continue being inclusive and as open as possible. And social media really has been key to this. Face-to-face meetings and physical communications, things like notice sheets, parish magazines, letters have not been available, so we've had to rely on the telephone, email, Facebook, and it's been a very steep learning curve. I think she's now stopped talking about me as an old dog learning new tricks, but that was fair. And we've been live streaming morning prayer and compline on weekdays, a Thursday thought, and then up until recently, Mass from the Vicarage study on Sunday mornings. And I think I've noticed the enormous difficulty of both grieving and celebrating with restrictions of numbers, singing, touching, and I think that's been really quite difficult for a lot of people. The other thing which has struck me is that we've reached far, far wider than just this parish during the time, and we're now considering reflecting on how we should think about using social media more regularly, perhaps live streaming services from church more regularly. But on the other hand also, what about those who don't have access to the internet? How do we support them? How do we reach them? How do we enable them to thrive? Emma, what's been your experience?
I think for me, it's made me realise that it's been a real privilege to serve as a deacon through this time. I've been reading Stephen Cottrell, the new Archbishop of York's book on priesthood, and he talks about how your deacon's year is a real foundation stone for the rest of your ministry. And actually this lockdown, this has provided real unique opportunities to fulfil the deacon's role in ways like never before. I guess I've been able to be watchful for the signs of God's presence through all of this, through the dark times. I've been able to bring the needs of the church and the hopes of all the people, and I've been able to try to search out the most vulnerable people and reaching into those forgotten corners of the world. So for me, it's been a great opportunity, I suppose. It's been a bit of an adventure. I read another book recently which talked about the church needing an adventure where the stakes are high and the outcomes are unknown. And I think that's what's been happening through this time. And I think probably that was similar for the first disciples. They were called to that adventure. They didn't know what the outcome was going to be, and the stakes were very high.
There you go. That's the kind of calibre of curate we have in this parish. Somebody who's read 2 books. That's very good. What high calibre we have. The second question, what are your hopes and concerns about what's ahead for the next 12 months? For me, concerns in terms of lots of them, but the parish, in terms of finance, we've been losing quite a lot of money since lockdown. How is that going to right itself, and how are we going to manage that? Always the fear of another lockdown and what that would mean to us as a community. In terms of hopes, well, hopefully the restrictions will be lifted, because we've got an awful lot of memorial services to do, some weddings to catch up with, and some holidays to have. Emma, what about you?
Yeah, I think in terms of concerns, we need to help people. A lot of people have struggled with the fact they haven't been able to receive the sacrament during this time. So I think we need to help people negotiate that. We may well end up in a lockdown again in the future. So we need probably to work through the impact of that loss that people have felt. But in terms of hopes, I've been really encouraged to see people developing their own spirituality. They've not been able to rely on the institution of the church. They haven't been able to come to church. So they found other ways of developing their spirituality. And again, I think our online presence, the daily offices, morning prayer and compline, have helped people to do that.
And we've got 2 more quick questions. So the next question is, what single thing gives us hope for the future of Christianity in Britain? My answer will be very brief and very concise. And the fact is that God is good. This is God's show, not ours. So, it's not our responsibility to be worrying about Christianity. The future of Christianity in this country is not our responsibility. We have our part to play, obviously, but God is good, God is faithful, and God will make sure that the church, the faith, continues and prospers.
And I think for me, what really gives me hope for the future of Christianity in Britain is that we've seen lots of people learning how to be church through this time. They haven't been able to do church, they haven't been able to come to church, so they've had to learn to be church, and people have been reaching out in all sorts of new ways to really be the church.
And finally, how can we all be praying for you both is our last question. And I think, again, very briefly, I think for wisdom to know how best to respond to the situation. It's changing day by day, week by week, so many possibilities. Where do we go? Which avenue do we choose? Where do we put our resources? Where do we put our energy? What's going to be the best way of making decisions for our community? I think that, for me, would be a key thing. And thank you for those prayers.
And I think for me personally, as I prepare to be ordained as a priest, I think having built these strong foundations, and as Stephen Cottrell again reminded me, that it's a real gift to become a priest. Priesthood is a gift. So I hope that as I receive that gift, I won't lose sight of the diaconal role. And that's something I think I'd like people to pray for.
Thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your prayers and support for the parish of East Preston, and in particular for Emma and her ministry as it continues to unfold. She mentioned Archbishop of York twice, which is a sure sign that she'll one day be Archbishop of Canterbury. Watch this space. So both from myself and Emma. Again, thank you for your support. Thank you for watching. God bless.